one question on everyone's lips, really. Something a bit relevant, a bit close to home, lads, as well, considering we have Tom Aspinall sitting there holding an interim title. He's not booked to fight the actual champion yet, Jon Jones. So the first question is, I mean, well, maybe angle towards you, Blake, but this is for everybody. Is Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones going to be the biggest fight in UFC history?
No.
And we shall expand on that, Blake.
We're starting there. I'm sorry to start 2025 in a cynical way. I don't know if everyone's going to be as cynical as me, but yeah. Look, I mean, biggest fight in UFC history. Like, by what metric are we even measuring
That's
this?
The question. That's
what
the question.
If we're measuring it by financial metrics, then absolutely not. No, Conor McGregor versus Khabib is, I believe, number one in terms of pay-per-views.
Sales,
It's what, sorry?
In terms of sales,
yes,
2.4.
It's not going to top that, I don't think. I think if you're trying to measure this by finances, then I would make an argument that not only is this not the biggest fight in UFC history, it's not actually the biggest fight the UFC can make today. Because today, I believe they could also do Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira, which is a bigger fight financially than what Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones would be, in my opinion.
I'm not an economist, though. I'm not an economist. I'm here for the.
Well, I am.
Here for the
Craig, okay? I am registered. No, I'm not.
Get that out there early. You know?
I'm here for the sentiment. I'm here for the feeling, and let's not get twisted. And I'm not ashamed to say it. The reason why I got into MMA is because of Conor McGregor. UFC 189, Conor McGregor versus Chad Mendes. It was what got me into the fight. It helped that it was Lawler McDonald 2, the fight before that. But that's what really made me fall in love with the sport. And if you look at the top 3 ranked pay-per-view buys of all time, they're Conor McGregor fights. But the UFC's model is less beholden to pay-per-view buys now. They're getting bigger TV deals. The model is different. They are a bigger company. And so when I'm measuring the size of fights, I'm looking at the consequence of the fights.
Right.
And Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall, for me, is the most consequential fight in UFC history because of what comes after it, what happens after it.
And also where we are at the moment as well. I think you could say it just based on where we are in terms of where the sport has gotten to. I'm going to throw a wild card in here anyway, but you go ahead, Blake.
No, I just think in terms of like the language, like, even if we're disregarding the finances, biggest fight in UFC history, like bigger than Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez? When we're talking about the guy that created the champ thing, and now every fighter wants to be a bloody champ. Yeah. No fighter now seems to really strive to be a long-time champion in their own division. You know, you've got like the likes of Demetrius Johnson, Anderson Silva, Jon Jones at light heavyweight, that you go, wow, what an achievement that was to be the champion for so long. Now everyone's like, no, I don't want to do 6 years of fighting the next man up. I just want to go up in weight, not cut weight, eat a few extra steaks and cupcakes, and now I can just fight the guy in the level above me. That's what that Conor McGregor-Eddie Alvarez fight did. Not to mention what it did in terms of propelling him into the stardom that led to the Floyd Mayweather fight. And that in itself bringing the UFC up to a whole nother level. And so I think biggest fight in history, absolutely not. What I will give you, and I think is absolutely true, is it's the most important fight that they could make right now in terms of going forward. Like, I think the heavyweight division massively needs this fight to happen, because if it doesn't, then we're staring at another sort of light heavyweight situation where it's like there's a huge contingent of fans that go, oh yeah, Tom's fine, but he would never have beat Jon Jones. And that will lead to the heavyweight title just not feeling as powerful as it should. And that's what I think. I think it's the most important fight they could make right now. 100% not the biggest fight in history of the UFC.
It's funny you should say that about the heavyweight title, because we kind of are already there, lads. I mean, Francis Ngannou took the lineal UFC heavyweight belt and he left. And that belt had never not been in the UFC, and now it's gone. I mean, it was actually outside the UFC for a period, but it came back. And no one got to take the legacy, the rub, the win streak off Ngannou. Like, usually, that's how we build our contenders. That's how we build our stars. They make their way up. They beat the champion. They take the legacy. They take the history. They take the champion's achievements, and they make it their own because they have passed them in ability. We have not seen that because no one went past Ngannou. He went. If no one goes past Jones, it's only going to get worse, Blake. I completely agree with you.
What I will say, following on from both of your points, and that's why I think this is the most important fight and the biggest fight they can make, because what comes after it, and again, I know Dana is the biggest naysayer, and he said he's never going to do business with Francis Ngannou. I remember Dana White saying he's never going to do business with Jon Jones. So he is a man that has changed his mind in the past.
He said a lot of stuff.
How dare you guys? I believe every single word that comes out of Dana's mouth. How dare you?
Well, I don't. And that's why I think that after this, there is a possibility that we can make not just the biggest fight in the UFC, not just the biggest fight in MMA, but the biggest fight in combat sports history. If you can get, and again, I'm rooting for Tom Aspinall. I'm a Brit. I want Tom Aspinall to win. But if you can get Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou locked in a cage together, you are printing money, because that's the fight I think that everybody wants to see. When you talk about the baddest man on the planet, that does not belong to a boxer anymore. The baddest man on the planet is the heavyweight champion in the UFC. Blake, you talked about the champ thing. The beauty of the heavyweight division is that there is nowhere to run. There is nowhere to go. That is true. The reason why it's the most. And for the longest time, the light heavyweight division was the blue ribbon division in the UFC. But right now, I feel like with the characters and the cast characters you've got in the heavyweight division, with Tom Aspinall going on a tear, barely getting out the first round of any of his fights, I think the Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones, in my opinion, is the biggest fight in UFC history because of what comes after it.
Okay, let me throw something at you here, Quaker, because you've just made me think of something. You're starting this off,
I can tell that.
and you're giving it the whole Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones is the biggest fight in UFC history. But you have just mentioned Francis Ngannou. So if I could say to you now, what would be bigger, Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones, or Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones if they made it happen? Turkey Al-Sheikh comes in and throws loads of money at Dana and says, "Go on, just partner with the PFL for one fight." Is Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones bigger than Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones?
It is. But we don't get there until we have Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. That fight needs to happen. And maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment, right? Because let's not get twisted. I remember Khabib versus Conor. I remember everything that came with it. I remember the promos, obviously the dolly and everything that happened in New York and the kind of horrible press conference where there was no fans there. It was such a long build up, and it culminated in the fight that wasn't necessarily the best fight, but what happened after it, Khabib jumping over the cage. I think that right now is the biggest fight in UFC history, and the pay-per-view buyers show that. But I do think that when we look back on fights that are made today, we're not going to be looking at pay-per-view buys. We're going to look at consequence. And for me, consequence means big. And I feel like this fight is the biggest fight in UFC history. But again, I can see where you're coming from, Blake. I can see where you're coming from, Alex.
You say we won't look back at pay-per-view buys. The first thing I did when I knew this was the question is I looked up what was the biggest fight in UFC history, and they come up with the pay-per-view buys.
I will say this though, lads. You're talking about pay-per-views. You're talking about maybe it will or it won't. But to throw a wild card at both of you, the UFC this year as a format might not appear in the same way we've always seen it. It's always been a pay-per-view model, but we're up for new negotiations. We might get the UFC on Netflix. And then if we get Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall on Netflix, then we might all be wrong. And it might very well be the biggest fight in UFC history because we don't actually know. So there's a little wild card to think about that as well for this year, because that totally could happen. You're
talking about like as if like the UFC partnered with Netflix or something like that, which you're absolutely right. We wouldn't obviously be looking at pay-per-views with that, but still biggest fight in UFC history. I just think Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall does not compare to like in terms of if everything has been on Netflix over the last 10 years, let's imagine a world in which Netflix, some multiverse where Netflix and UFC partnered up 10 years ago.
Right.
I believe that McGregor Khabib, McGregor Diaz 2, these fights, McGregor Alvarez, I think would be ahead of what Jones Aspinall could do now. I think that Jones Aspinall is like a hardcore MMA fan's dream. We all need it. There is no fight we want more at the moment. Any hardcore MMA fan, there's no fight we want more at the moment than Jones v. Aspinall. And I think that's true of everyone that knows the sport well. But if you are just a casual fan that goes, oh, I'll throw on a UFC thing because it's on or whatever it is, or, oh, there's loads of media about a certain fighter or fight, let me pay my money to whoever to buy the pay-per-view for that or whatever. If it was Netflix subscriptions, I still think that Jones Aspinall would not get the same kind of attention. It still wouldn't get, random people in the supermarket chatting about it in the same way that a McGregor fight has done in the past.
In the past, yeah, but unfortunately, like that's not actually the reality of what can happen, is it? And the reality might be, it might get advertised on Netflix, and people in the supermarket are talking about it, especially if it's a supermarket in the UK and there's a British champion on your Netflix banner fighting for a world title. You know what I mean? But we don't know. Like,
and this is the final piece of my argument. When you look at a fight that was absolutely horrendous, Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, those numbers are absolutely astronomical. So if the UFC does move to Netflix, there is every chance that the viewing figures, the amount of eyeballs on Aspinall versus Jones is actually more than the 2.4 million people that watched Khabib versus Conor McGregor.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. I mean, you know, talk about Kimbo Slice was one of the most watched MMA fighters forever because it was on CBS with like 6.5 million people watching it. You know what I mean? Like, nothing to do with pay-per-views, but that's just how it goes. All right, we got to keep moving on, guys, because we've got a lot to talk about today. But let's just keep on topic for now, at least on this, because I want to ask you the question then. Like, are heavyweight fights in boxing, they typically are the biggest, except they're not because of Floyd Mayweather. In MMA, are heavyweight fights usually the biggest fights in our sport? Because Conor McGregor's kind of changed everything, hasn't he, really? And even if you were to say yes, traditionally, you had guys like GSP who always sold really well. In fact, I think Usman Masvidal is one of the top-selling pay-per-views of all time, and that's 2 welterweights, and that was all because of the hype Jorge had managed to generate for himself of the whole BMF thing. So I don't know if it's true, but I don't want to lead the question. I'll let you guys.
I think if Jon Jones didn't go up to heavyweight, the heavyweight division would not be as sought after by the fans as it is today. I think it's the Jon Jones effect that's done that. I think if we just saw Tom Aspinall beat Curtis Blades to become the undisputed heavyweight champion, and now we're looking at him fighting a Cyril Gane or a Sergey Spivak or Alexander Volkov for the second time, I think people are like, meh, heavyweight's not great. Tom's quite good, but heavyweight's not a great division. And I think, unfortunately, that's what I think is, I'm slightly going back here and I'm sorry, but like the Jones-Tom fight happening now is so important for Tom's legacy going forward. Because I've said this on the MMA Fan Show before, that I believe Tom Aspinall has the possibility of becoming the Demetrius Johnson of heavyweight, where he's just taking out guy after guy after guy for 5-6 years, but no one cares because they're not people that he's not fighting. He's got no Joker to his Batman. He's got, you know, there's nothing there that kind of gets people really interested. If he beats, if John vacates and then he beats Cyril Gane and Jailton Almeida and Volkov again, it's like, no one's going to care. And it's just going to be like, who's Tom fighting this week? Oh, okay, cool. Like, and it's just not going to have the gravitas that we want it to for Tom. He's got to get that Jones fight.
And on the heavyweight division chat, I do feel like for the first time in a long time, and you touched on it earlier, Alex, it feels like the heavyweight division is like boxing. There's 3 people that have a piece of the heavyweight title. Right, like we talked about Francis Ngannou, who's got the lineal heavyweight title. Then we talk about Jon Jones, who's got the actual UFC heavyweight title, and Tom Aspinall's the interim champion. So it's so segmented. I feel like we want unification. That's why I think there's such a clamor for this fight to happen. And let's not get twisted. We were all frustrated in the lead up to Jones versus Stipe. We were all frustrated with Jones dismissing the Aspinall fight. But all he did was make that fight 5 times bigger. He made us want it more. And I think by the time that fight does eventually roll around, I think that's the only fight that both men will fight in 2025. But by the time that rolls around, we will be thirsty and hungry for it. And people will be out in the masses to watch it because it's such a good fight. And for the first time, and I know Jon Jones towards the back end of his time in the light heavyweight division put forward performances that weren't that impressive. But for the first time in a very, very long time, he's going in the cage with somebody that we think can really, really hurt him.
All right, so it's a question that everyone was kind of asking last year. Some people said yes, some people said no. But do you think anybody actually believes that Jon Jones is scared of Tom Aspinall?
No. Jon Jones isn't scared of anybody. Jon Jones is not scared of anybody. And like, when you talk about the baddest man on the planet, that title belongs to Jon Jones, and not for all the good reasons. He is a bad man with bad intentions, and he doesn't fear anybody. He's playing a game. What Jon Jones is enjoying is, for the longest time in his career, he was the best in the world, but he wasn't necessarily the biggest pay-per-view draw. It wasn't necessarily the most popular fighter on the roster, But right now, he is that. Right now, Jon Jones is a bona fide superstar. When he walks in the room, when he walks into a press conference, everybody wants to hear what he's saying. And I think he's just reveling in it. But I don't think Jon Jones is scared of any man that walks planet Earth.
I like it. Blake?
Well, what you said was, does anyone believe that? And some people are stupid, so some people do believe that.
Stupid, dude.
But I would. It's funny, isn't it? Because I suppose it's like, is he afraid of fighting Tom Aspinall? No, he's not afraid of fighting Tom Aspinall. If they squared up to each other in a parking lot or anything like that, I don't think he'd run away or anything like that. But is he concerned about his legacy when he stares at Tom Aspinall on the contract? 100% he is. That's why he's so desperately saying, well, Alex Pereira. He was talking about getting FU money to fight Tom, but when it comes to Alex Pereira, it was just like, oh yeah, I'll fight Alex.
Yeah.
So it's like, so that in itself to me says fear is a strong word and scared is a strong word, but there's something in there, and he's not scared of being in the cage with him, but he's scared of losing.
Yeah.
And that is what I think it is. So it depends on kind of how you're looking at the word scared and fear and stuff like that. But for sure, I think he sees any other heavyweight's name on the contract, or if he sees Alex Pereira's name on the contract, he's signing it without even blinking.
Yeah.
As soon as he sees Tom Aspinall's name on that contract, a little bit of fear starts to creep in.
I think it's risk is really the word, right? He's trying to manage the risk of his next, opponent as he's managed his entire career. And to think that this guy is actually scared, I think it's a scary thought to hurt a legacy that you've protected and built for so long. But this is also a guy that was getting blackout drunk the week of fights because he thought he would just beat the guy up, and that's literally he's not scared at all. He's like, he's flippant, dismissant of his opponents. So that's probably not happening now, but I think risk is the word. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that the frustration from MMA fans is that he's being a bit of a hypocrite, because when he was running through the light heavyweight division and beating Shogun and beating Rampage, beating Lyoto Machida and beating Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, and just taking out these legends, they were allowing him to build his name. You kind of have to do the job. When you're in combat sports, you have to do the job. There's an act of service that you have to do. I think Stipe done it for Jon Jones. Nobody in their right mind thought that Stipe Miocic, after not being in the cage for 3 or 4 years, was going to beat Jon Jones. That fight only really served Stipe's bank account and Jon Jones' legacy. And I feel like Jon Jones isn't doing the job. And the job is to, if you are that guy, go and prove you're that guy. MMA, the beauty of it, and the reason why it's so popular and more popular than boxing right now, in my opinion, is that it's the man that beats the man, and you know who's the best. And unfortunately, Jon Jones, a man who kind of reveled in that, a man who came to or ascended in that as a result of beating legends, he's not doing the service to Tom Aspinall, and that's why I feel like MMA fans are very frustrated.
Yeah, the hypocritical thing is what a lot of people have said, because Jon beat I think 5 champions in like 1 year, and then he's saying, "Oh, Tom's not beat any champions. Who are these?" It's because there aren't any at heavyweight. Ngannou left. Everyone else has retired. There are none. And obviously the fan base knows that. And that is partly why I think they're being frustrated. Does that translate them into saying, Jon is scared? I don't know, Blake.
Well, let's just talk another bit about like just how protective Jon is about his legacy historically here. Because, and I'm going to play slight armchair psychologist here, but like, you're talking about the fact that he was getting like blackout drunk before fighting Gustafsson in the first fight and stuff like that. Could he be doing that because he's got a built-in excuse to himself?
Sure.
Of like, but I didn't take it seriously. When an opponent turned around last minute and he was supposed to fight Chael Sonnen,
151.
He stepped back and said, "No, I'm not going to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice," which led to Dana White going mental. Now he blames his team, but at the time, I'm pretty sure he didn't have many nice words to say about Jon Jones. And that was one of the only times that UFC had to pull a whole event, didn't they? Because of that, because Jon Jones did not want to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice. And we think about how common it is these days for a fighter to go, look, Shavkat did it against Ian Gary and he didn't even get the belt opportunity there. But just to take a short notice fight, Islam Makhachev with Volk the second time.
Tom did it against Sergey.
Tom did it against Sergey.
When he won the injury, he was injured.
Such a bad decision from Tom, by the way. I'm so glad it paid off, but I was so
great decision from our future champ.
Yes.
But he's very, very protective. As soon as a fighter came along at light heavyweight, that a lot of people went, oh, I think you've got away with one there, John. Dominic Reyes beat you.
Yes.
Yeah.
He went, I'm done with light heavyweight. Dana White wanted to turn around and do the rematch. John was like, nah, I'm good. Vacate. Oh, do you want to go up and fight Francis Ngannou then? No, I'll take my time. I'm just going to eat a few donuts and just, take my time a little bit, wait 3 years or whatever it was to go up to heavyweight. Oh, Ngannou's gone now. I'm ready to go. Like, look, I know
Could be coincidence.
I know I'm being slightly kind of antagonistic and facetious here, but there's something to it. He's very, very protective of that legacy.
He is. And do you know what's, I think, baffling to a lot of MMA fans is that if you look at his last 3 fights at light heavyweight, Anthony Smith, where if Anthony Smith was a coward, he could have stayed down and he could have won the belt on a technicality. Thiago Santos was not an impressive performance. Dominic Reyes, I think, won that fight. Yeah. And then Jon Jones didn't fight for, 3-4 years until he fought Cyril Gane for the heavyweight championship. In that time, what did he do to mend the relationship between him and the UFC? I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden he's Dana's golden goose. He's Dana's favorite child. And that's what I think really, really frustrates and annoys MMA fans.
Yeah. I'm going to pull you up on the use of the word coward there. I'm like, he got a need in the head. There's no coward. Aljamain Sterling was not a coward. Yeah, he was losing that fight, and then Peter Yan was an absolute idiot and need him in the head. And look what's happened to Peter Yan. I mean, he's actually bouncing back now, but... but I mean, in terms of like sliding doors moments, like Peter Yan not throwing that knee. Yeah, I mean, where was his career now? Where was Aljamain Sterling's career? Crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right. One final question on Jon Jones. Then, so we've talked about his legacy. So, how do you think a loss at this point to Tom Aspinall would actually affect that legacy? It's a tough question, isn't it?
It is. Well, I'll go.
You go.
I think it will be huge because Jon Jones, part of his legacy is the fact that he is unbeaten. No one counts the Matt Hamill fight. And he's looking to get that taken off of his record. So Jon Jones is an unbeaten fighter, and despite the fact that we think he may have lost some fights, the Gustafsson fight or the Dominic Reyes fight, he is an unbeaten fighter. So I feel like losing to Tom Aspinall, a man that some people perceive him to be ducking, I think that does damage his legacy, because a huge part of the reason why Jon Jones is Jon Jones is that when locked in the cage, you haven't seen the man best him. And a loss of Tom Aspinall, it would only, in my opinion, would only be a knockout. Seeing Jon Jones flat on his back in the cage, I think would that image would severely damage his legacy.
That's pretty poignant there, to be fair.
I don't know how much it damages his legacy. I think that for everything he did at light heavyweight, he's then gone up and won the second belt as well. I don't think a loss to Tom Aspinall damages his legacy as much as the PED infractions and the run-ins with the law and the other horrible things he's been accused of and there's been police reports about and all that stuff. That, to me, damages his legacy way more than a legitimate loss to a surging heavyweight prospect in his prime. I mean, when you look at the kind of nitty gritty of what Aspinall versus Jones is, and the reasons why Jones doesn't want to fight Aspinall, which if I was in Jon Jones's management team, I'd be saying, yeah, mate, don't take that fight. He's in his prime. He's a natural heavyweight, which you are not. You've struggled in the past with people that are just as tall as you, like the Gustafssons and the Reyes of the world. Tom Aspinall's 6'5".
Yeah.
Like, I would be advising him to stay away from him as well. So I don't think the loss to Tom Aspinall damages his legacy too much. I actually think, in a weird way, if he fought Tom Aspinall and lost, that's less damaging to his legacy than if he avoids him.
I kind of feel like I'm on your side really there, Blake, as well, even before you both gave your answers. Because for me, Jon Jones's legacy was set in stone really within that first year when he became the youngest champion ever and then beat 5 former champions. Everything he did after that was incredibly impressive and part of like a dominant streak that you don't see from champions. But, we knew everything about how great Jon Jones was already by that point. We were like, this kid's incredible. One of the best of all time, if not the best. I agree to you. I think if he doesn't fight Tom, then we're not going to be talking about this part of his career anyway. We were just Jon Jones from 10 years from now, we'll talk about what he did at light heavyweight. The heavyweight thing probably will come up. If he fights Tom, and it depends on how the fight goes, like if he has a war with Tom and he loses, but he shows up and shows every part of his game, and, I think people would only respect that. I don't think anyone's going to come out of the woodwork and be like, Jon Jones was never any good, because the narratives about the fight are all on the table. Like, we understand Jon's at the end of his career, Tom's at the start. That's literally why this fight isn't getting made, because Jon says he's not done enough. So I think I agree with you. It depends on whose perspective you look at. I think the hardcore fans, if he does fight Tom and it's a good fight, will understand the narrative of mixed martial arts and they'll always look at this guy as one of the best. But you are right as well, because he has technically never been beaten. And the sight of him beaten completely does change everything you look back on his career. But I don't know, as someone who understands, and I'm sure you guys obviously do, fighters get older and they lose.
Yeah.
One man didn't, Habib. I mean, technically GSP didn't, right? When he got older, he did lose though. So it's kind of like, it's to be expected in a way. And I think I would rather see Jon pull the trigger, take the fight, get in there, try and be the man who you say you are, and get it done with Tom Aspinall, I think. So
yeah,
we'll have to see though. 2025, maybe we'll get it. Maybe it will be on Netflix and be the biggest fight ever. I don't know.
On AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.